Chapter 3. A String of Pearls. Lady Vivienne Mortimer was the very embodiment of Victorian elegance, renowned for her collection of rare jewels and her commanding presence at London's high society events. Her portrait in Hargrave's portfolio depicted her surrounded by strings of pearls, each strand more lustrous than the last. As Holmes and Watson approached her grand Mayfair estate, they prepared themselves to encounter a woman of formidable character. They were greeted at the door by Lady Mortimer herself, a tall woman with a regal bearing and piercing blue eyes. Despite her calm demeanor, Holmes noted a faint tension in her posture. "Mr. Holmes," she said, motioning them inside, "your letter mentioned a matter of urgency. Please, enlighten me." Once seated in her opulent drawing room, Holmes wasted no time. "Lady Mortimer, we have reason to believe your life is in grave danger. Two individuals depicted in this portfolio," he gestured to Hargrave's work, "have been murdered in a manner mirroring their portraits. You are the next in sequence." Lady Mortimer arched an eyebrow. "Murdered? How ghastly. And you suspect I am to meet a similar fate?" Holmes nodded. "Your pearls feature prominently in your portrait, suggesting they may play a role in the killer's method. Have you noticed anything unusual regarding your collection?" Lady Mortimer hesitated, her fingers brushing the pearls around her neck. 2 days ago, I discovered that the clasp on this very necklace had been tampered with. I assumed it was merely a fault in the workmanship. "May I examine it?" Holmes asked. She removed the necklace and handed it to him. Holmes inspected it closely, his magnifying glass revealing faint scratches near the clasp. "This is no accident," he said grimly. "Someone has altered the mechanism, likely to introduce a substance or device. I suspect poison." Lady Mortimer paled but retained her composure. "What am I to do, Mr. Holmes?" "Do not wear any of your jewels, especially this necklace, until I deem it safe. Moreover, I recommend avoiding public appearances until we apprehend the culprit." That evening, Holmes and Watson positioned themselves near Lady Mortimer's estate, expecting the killer to strike. They watched as a carriage pulled up to the house, and a figure cloaked in black descended. The intruder crept through the gardens and approached a side entrance. Holmes motioned for Watson to follow. They entered the house silently, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. In the dimly lit drawing room, they found the intruder rummaging through Lady Mortimer's jewelry box. Holmes seized the moment, lunging at the figure. The intruder, a wiry man with sharp features, struggled but was overpowered. Watson secured him with a length of cord. "Who are you?" Watson demanded. The man sneered. "I'm merely a messenger." Holmes's keen eyes scanned the man's belongings. Among them was a small vial labeled with an alchemical symbol. "Poison," he murmured. "Intended for Lady Mortimer's pearls, no doubt. And this," he added, holding up a folded piece of paper bearing the same compass and vines insignia they had found before, "links you to the architect." The man's defiance faltered, but he revealed little more under questioning. The next morning, Lady Mortimer expressed her gratitude, though her demeanor remained reserved. "You've saved my life, Mr. Holmes. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Holmes inclined his head. "Your safety is reward enough, Lady Mortimer. However, the true mastermind remains at large. This architect is meticulous, resourceful, and utterly ruthless. Until they are stopped, no one depicted in this portfolio is safe." Watson, flipping through the portfolio, paused at the next portrait. "The playwright," he said. "Gregory Henshaw. His next." "Then we must act swiftly," Holmes said, his tone resolute. "The architect's game is far from over." Chapter 4. The playwright's premonition. Gregory Henshaw, a celebrated playwright, was known for his macabre tragedies and cynical wit. His portrait in Hargrave's portfolio showed him seated at a writing desk, his quill dripping ink that morphed into dark tendrils, coiling ominously around him. It was an image that spoke to the torment of his craft, as well as the peril he now faced. Holmes and Watson arrived at the Lyceum Theatre, where Henshaw was rehearsing his latest production, The Last Curtain. The title struck an ominous chord in Watson, who couldn't help but wonder if Henshaw's end was indeed near. Inside the grand, dimly lit theatre, Henshaw sat in the center row, his sharp features illuminated by the flickering gaslight. His thin frame and hawkish gaze made him appear as if he belonged more to the realm of his tragedies than the living world. Holmes approached him directly. "Mr. Henshaw, I regret to inform you that your life is in danger." Henshaw smirked, his tone laced with irony. "What playwright's life isn't, Mr. Holmes? Threats are as common to me as applause." "This is no idle threat," Holmes said, presenting the portfolio. "Two individuals depicted in this series have already met their deaths, each in a manner reflecting their portrait. You are next." Henshaw's smirk faltered as he examined the painting. "So, this is to be my epitaph. Ink turning to poison, I presume? How frightfully poetic. Have you noticed anything unusual of late?" Holmes asked. Henshaw hesitated before answering. "A peculiar letter arrived a week ago, unsigned but brimming with critiques of my work. It suggested that my tragedies lack authenticity, that I do not truly understand the stakes of death. May I see it?" Holmes asked. Henshaw led them to his dressing room, where he retrieved the letter. Holmes studied it carefully, noting the distinct handwriting and the faint scent of chemicals on the paper. "This ink," he murmured, "is not ordinary. Watson, make a note of this." That evening, Holmes and Watson remained at the theater, anticipating the killer's next move. The rehearsal concluded, and the theater fell silent. Henshaw, despite his initial skepticism, agreed to stay in his dressing room under their protection. The quiet was broken by a faint rustling sound near the stage. Holmes motioned for Watson to follow as they investigated. Beneath the stage, they found a shadowy figure tampering with the theater's gas lines. "Stop," Holmes commanded, but the figure fled, disappearing into the labyrinth of corridors. Holmes and Watson pursued but lost sight of the intruder. Returning to the gas lines, Holmes discovered a device rigged to release toxic fumes into Henshaw's dressing room. "This contraption," he said grimly, "was designed to ensure a slow and theatrical demise." Henshaw was moved to safety, and the authorities were alerted. The device was dismantled, and Holmes scrutinized its craftsmanship. "This is the work of someone with a meticulous mind," he concluded. "The architect strikes again, blending artistry and murder." Henshaw, shaken but alive, thanked Holmes and Watson. "It seems I owe my survival to you both. Perhaps my next tragedy will include a detective, a man who cheats death at every turn." Holmes merely nodded, his thoughts already on the next target. Watson flipped to the portfolio's fifth portrait, Dr. Elias Crowther, a physician surrounded by vials and surgical instruments. "Dr. Crowther," Holmes mused. "A man of medicine, yet no stranger to death. We must find him at once." Chapter 5. The Doctor's Dilemma. Dr. Elias Crowther, a celebrated physician and surgeon, was renowned for his skill in the operating theatre. His portrait in Hargrave's portfolio depicted him surrounded by gleaming surgical tools and vials, a scalpel poised in his hand. The faint shadow of a skeletal figure loomed behind him, a stark reminder of the thin line between life and death. Holmes and Watson arrived at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, where Dr. Crowther worked tirelessly. Inside the bustling hospital, the scent of antiseptic mingled with the hum of activity. They found the doctor in his office, examining a patient file with an air of grim concentration. "Dr. Crowther," Holmes began, "we have urgent business. May we have a moment of your time?" Crowther looked up, his sharp eyes taking in the pair. "If this is about a patient, you must wait. Otherwise, speak quickly, I am needed elsewhere." "This concerns your life," Holmes said, producing the portfolio. "This portrait, commissioned by Ambrose Hargrave, marks you as the next target in a string of murders. The deaths are precise, reflecting the symbols in these paintings. We believe the killer intends to strike imminently." Crowther examined the portrait, his brow furrowing. "This is troubling, to say the least. But why me? I am a doctor, not a man of intrigue." Holmes's gaze was steady. "The motives behind this scheme remain elusive, but each victim thus far has been killed in a manner symbolic of their profession. I fear your surgical tools or the chemicals in your care may be used against you." Crowther hesitated, then nodded. "If what you say is true, I must take precautions. But you will understand that I cannot abandon my duties." "Of course," Holmes said. "However, I insist on shadowing you for the remainder of the day. If the killer intends to strike, they will not find you unguarded." Holmes and Watson followed Crowther through the day's rounds, observing his interactions with patients and staff. Holmes's sharp eyes missed nothing, from the faint tremor in an elderly nurse's hands to the subtle way a porter avoided their gaze. As night fell, Crowther prepared for an emergency surgery, a procedure on a young man injured in an industrial accident. Holmes and Watson watched from the observation gallery as the doctor worked with precision, his scalpel flashing under the gaslights. Suddenly, Crowther faltered, his hand trembling as he reached for a vial of antiseptic. He examined the vial, his face paling. "This solution smells off," he said, setting it aside. Holmes bolted from the gallery, Watson close behind. In the preparation room, Holmes inspected the vials and found one labeled with a faint compass and vines insignia. "Poison," he declared. "Administered, it would have caused catastrophic failure of the patient's vital organs, implicating you in their death." Crowther stared at the vial, his expression a mix of horror and anger. "This is monstrous." "It is also calculated," Holmes said. "The architect not only seeks to kill but to destroy reputations." As Holmes pieced together the clues, a scream echoed from the far end of the hospital. They rushed toward the sound and found a nurse slumped against the wall, her face pale. "A man," she gasped, "dressed as a porter. He was tampering with the instruments in the operating room." Holmes and Watson pursued the figure through the darkened corridors of the hospital. The intruder fled toward the storage wing, where crates and medical supplies created a labyrinth. Holmes cornered the man, a wiry figure with sharp features and an air of desperation. The intruder lunged at Holmes with a scalpel, but Watson tackled him to the ground. Holmes quickly subdued him, his voice cold. "You are a pawn of the architect. Who is your master?" The man sneered but said nothing. Among his belongings, Holmes found a list of hospital staff, with Crowther's name circled in red. The next morning, Crowther thanked Holmes and Watson, his gratitude tempered by the weight of what had transpired. "You have saved not only my life but my honor. For that, I am indebted to you." Holmes inclined his head. "Your safety was paramount, Doctor. However, our work is not yet done. The architect remains at large, and their motives grow clearer with each move." Watson opened the portfolio to the next portrait. Charlotte Vane, a stage actress depicted mid-performance, a mask in one hand and a dagger in the other. "An actress," Holmes mused. "The stage is set for our next confrontation."